Okay, so welcome to the first ever Sports Tech Live video summation of the newsletter. So just trying something new. So let's kind of see how it goes. So this is the issue that will be coming out later today, 10th of July. Obviously I haven't written any of my usual pieces. That's why I'm kind of experimenting with this video to see if a video version of it might be easier to consume, might get a bit more traction, and looking to build the different kind of social media channels, including YouTube, which I think is an important one to do. So these are the stories that I'm going to be putting out later today. So obviously Streaming Wars is the one that we cover first every week. Both for me personally, it's probably the biggest thing I'm most kind of interested in, but I think in the sports space, obviously the media rights is probably one of the biggest and most iconic component of it. And then obviously with the digitization of broadcasting, I think it's the perfect storm for us to cover here at Sports Tech Live. So obviously with the Premier League having all their games streamed and broadcasted for the remainder of the season, BBC picked up 4 of those games. So the game between Man City and Southampton was the most ever watched Premier League game domestically in the UK. So that came in at a peak audience of 5.7 million. So I think that's really important to kind of note. Obviously there's kind of pros and cons to going free to air. Obviously opens it up to a wider audience. Downside is obviously kind of harder to monetize, especially on someone like BBC, who have no advertisements as part of their broadcasting. So obviously it's kind of hard to monetize, but obviously there is value in having 5.7 million people tuned in. So my initial kind of thought to that is there a second screen kind of option for BBC to kind of implement to kind of engage people a bit more and potentially monetize them in different ways. Obviously 5.7 million is a huge number tuning in at any one time. So I think there's a lot to kind of play with there. So my initial kind of gut reaction is our BBC going to be a player in the future? Obviously I think with COVID, meaning all games are broadcast, and that might be the same for next season as well. As yet we don't know, but can the BBC become a player and not have major amount of games, but can they go for the kind of 10 games a season kind of package if that becomes available? Obviously the Amazon deal kind of saw that happen. BBC or Amazon picked up 2 rounds of 10 games for pretty modest fees, all things considered. It wasn't the $1 billion or £1 billion that Sky and BT were spending, but it's definitely something interesting. So I definitely keep an eye on this, of how the different leagues kind of look at free to air. Obviously when you look at the NFL in the US, pretty much all their sports or all their games are on free to air. It's Fox, CBS, NBC, which is by and large free to air. So it's definitely something to watch in the UK. Obviously the rights are kind of opening up again for future deals. So I've often kind of speculated that there's going to be more deals done on a non-exclusive basis. So that might give the free to air companies a chance to play, but also potential for the Premier League to launch their own kind of OTT direct-to-consumer streaming platform, which we kind of talked about earlier this year. Scrolling down, you can see there's a good kind of piece here from Sportico, which is a new kind of sports business website who are pushing out some really nice things. If you listen to the Bloomberg Business of Sport podcast, one of the guys from that is kind of heading up that Sportico website. So their piece here is about streaming sports, how Amazon, Apple look ready to compete with ESPN. So really nice piece about the future of streaming and how that's undoubtedly the future. Obviously with it being digitized, the sports leagues and teams actually know who's on the other side of that, whereas before now anyone can turn on their TV and no one knows who's kind of watching, especially from a league and team perspective. But having that relationship owned by the team and the league, and if that data is shared with the league and the team, then it opens up a whole new world of personalization, and then just the direct kind of fan engagement that the teams and leagues can do on a digital platform. Obviously you've seen the likes of Twitch kind of blow up because of that fan relationship and that fan engagement piece, where a streamer can talk directly with their fans. They run games and competitions, um, do donation charity events. The list is really endless once you start opening up that relationship. So scrolling down, Viacom CBS will stream UEFA Champions League, and I believe the Europa League as well. Obviously Turner Sports, who own Bleacher Report, kind of dropped it, especially with the season still outstanding. Obviously, there was news as well this week about the draws for the remaining games in the Champions League and Europa League. So this will begin for that kind of mini kind of World Cup-ish Champions League and Europa League tournaments that will be held in Portugal and Germany respectively, and then will be through the 2024 season. So a nice little pickup there from Viacom. Not sure why Turner Sports, and more in particular why Bleacher Report didn't pick up that contract renewal. So I thought that was an interesting way for Bleacher Report to get high quality content in a market that's developing for pretty much every team in Europe is looking to break into the US market. So I thought there was nice things that could have been done there. So scrolling down again, so La Liga and the Danish Rights Alliance wins case blocking of illegal live sports. So yeah, I kind of started off the year kind of talking about the piracy issue. At one of the conferences I attended this week, because that's one of the main things of COVID. I'm able to attend a lot more conferences from my little home office here. But one of the speakers at that was kind of saying that illegal sports streaming is going to be worth 13.5 billion by 2023. So obviously it's a huge issue, and that's a per year figure. So I'm not sure how that number was actually calculated. Is the the money spent on piracy and the advertising that's generated from it, is that worth 13.5 billion, or is it costing the leagues and teams 13.5 billion a year? So a little bit unsure. Actually messaged the speaker to see where that figure came from, but I haven't heard back yet. But obviously it's a big issue. I think everyone can understand. So in Denmark, the ISPs will be shutting down a company called Rojo Directa. So I think the article goes on to mention that there's 19,000 streamers from Denmark that were using this platform to illegally stream games, of which La Liga games were part of it. So La Liga definitely seemed to be making the biggest push to kind of clamp down on piracy. Obviously last week's story as well was La Liga driven, and so they're really looking to kind of shore up their content on an international basis and take it out of the hands of pirates. So will this go in any way to stop the piracy issue? I don't really think it does. There's probably going to be a million more kind of copycats, maybe even using the Rojo Directa name, just under different domain names to kind of draw in that audience that they once had. So it'll be interesting to see what their next move is. So Sports European returns sees 24% of streaming surge. Yeah, I think that goes without saying. With more live sports, people are going to be streaming more, especially from a live context. So obviously loads of viewers kind of piling in at the same time. Belgian Pro League lands Orange with 5-year 11 deal. So yeah, at the World Football Summit, the 11 Sports are actively engaged with that conference. So a lot of the speakers were from 11 Sports, which is good to see. Luis Vicente, the CEO, was kind of on the panel a couple of times, and Andrea, the owner of 11 Sports, founder of MPN Silva and owner of Leeds United, who they're hoping will make the Premier League next year. They were kind of talking about different potential deals and joint ventures that they might be able to kind of snap up in these kind of uncertain times. And I guess this is kind of one of the first Belgian Pro League. Yeah, so obviously domestic rights deal there in Belgium, and it would be interesting, with kind of talks over a Belgian / Dutch league kind of merger, how this will kind of potentially grow over the years. And then there's an interesting piece about the coronavirus impact on MLS TV's coverage and their experimentation. Obviously they're kind of doing a mini kind of World Cup in Florida as well. So obviously there's kind of restrictions on how many people can be in a stadium filming it. I think BT had a stat that they kind of released that prior to COVID, they had about 70 to 80 people in stadium as part of their broadcast team, whereas that now has been reduced to 10. So obviously, that's a big disparity, and the quality of the broadcast has been the same from my perspective. So be interesting to see what all these kind of enforced issues kind of impact the game longer term. Obviously the old phrase of necessity is the mother of all invention. And every sports team, league, media company in the world has had to kind of operate under new terms. And then obviously last week I kind of spoke about Sky Fan Zone. So I checked it out over the last week, and for me it wasn't a great experience. To kind of walk you through what the experience was, it's essentially a Zoom call with kind of live Twitter kind of polling. So kind of tuned in for the Arsenal versus Leicester game, and had a call with a couple of friends. But essentially what happened was my screen of my laptop was the Zoom call. Every once in a while a poll will pop up, like who you think is going to win, Arsenal or Leicester, or a draw. I voted draw, which ended up being the result. But obviously, as I kind of went through all the different polls, it was obviously a heavily Arsenal fan base that were kind of taking part in those polls, because everything was skewed more towards Arsenal. And then in tandem with that, on Sky Sports Football, they had a kind of a special broadcast with two of the hosts kind of speaking with two former players, so Kevin Campbell and Steve Claridge, and they were getting them to kind of speak over different talking points that were coming up in the game, and as a result of the polls that were kind of coming through. So I did like that kind of engagement, a poll coming to me, being sent out to all the other people tuning in, and then the kind of people there discussing the results of that. And they said it multiple times in the broadcast that obviously it's a very heavy Arsenal fan base that are tuning in right now. So essentially all the polls were kind of worthless. It was basically more of a check-in of how many Arsenal fans do we have in the room. I was kind of disappointed because I really thought it was going to be in sync viewing experience, so that myself and my friends could watch the same game in essentially a Zoom call with or little video feeds along the side, so we could kind of chat while watching the same video feed. So that's what BT have done. So I was kind of doing a bit of research this week, and it turns out it's a company called Scenic, and they're doing that kind of synced streaming of different services. So obviously if you're in far apart in the world, you could watch Netflix at the same time with a friend, or in a long distance relationship. But obviously now in COVID times, everyone, even if you're living close to friends, the new behavior might be that you'll just kind of tune in kind of virtually, and have that kind of experience there. So looking forward to checking that out next week, because I think that experience is much more closely to what I was expecting with the Sky Fan Zone. So I'll definitely let you know how that goes next week. So looking at the gambling section, PointsBet and Detroit Tigers have kind of set up a partnership. So it's the first Major League Baseball franchise to set up with a gambling company. So I'd expect loads more to kind of following the trends that we've seen for the last kind of 18 months since gambling has effectively been given the okay in the US. So a good piece here in Sportco. Again, I think that's going to be one of our new kind of favorites here at SportsTechLive. And sports betting won't offer any sort of true relief to growing state deficits. So it's kind of one of the things that's kind of bandied about, that there's all these extra tax dollars that we could get if we legalize sports. But I guess the main kind of point here is that the deficits are growing so big for states, even before COVID, all the extra spending that's been needed, that legalizing sports and the tax dollars that can generate, it's really kind of a drop in the ocean. So it's not just oh yeah, let's legalize sports betting and then all our budget deficits will disappear. So going on now to esports, so Ninja's return to streaming on YouTube shows he still has star power. Yeah, I think that goes without saying. obviously the viewing numbers while he was at Mixer were much lower than when he was on a Twitch, but I think there was about 160,000 people who kind of tuned into Ninja's live stream on YouTube within a matter of minutes. I think, kind of leveled out and kind of dropped to 120. I think the article goes on to say, but that's concurrent viewers. That's absolutely a huge amount of number of people tuning into to a live stream. So he hasn't made any kind of decisions yet. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago, I was kind of speculating, would he go to YouTube? Would he go to Twitch? So nothing's been kind of nailed down yet. And I think it was his decision just to do something on YouTube. I'd imagine he'll probably do something on Twitch. I think it would be a smart move for him to do that, where he can keep fans on both platforms kind of happy and engaged, and then see who offers them the best package. Everyone thinks in the esports gaming world that he's just going to go back to Twitch. Obviously, it's the big player. 60 odd percent of the market share. YouTube is number two at about 26-27%. I don't think he's going to go to Facebook gaming. I think he's tried that once, going to Mixer, going to a smaller platform, and it didn't work out, obviously, within the space of like 10 months. So yeah, I guess he's going to play both sides, YouTube and Twitch, see what works for him. I don't think either really need to stump up the cash that Mixer were looking to give him as a guaranteed contract. So will one of them blink and kind of offer him a deal he's willing to sign for exclusivity, or will he just continue down the path of building fan bases on both, and using either or both platforms as and when he chooses? Obviously, if YouTube is serious about gaming, it's a perfect opportunity to try and get one of the biggest stars. But it didn't move the needle at all for Mixer. So how valuable is that for them? And I think both Twitch and YouTube have great platforms where they don't need to prove themselves to anybody. So the likelihood of them matching his Mixer deal, I don't think was there. There was rumors that Facebook were willing to match it, or maybe even double his Mixer deal, but I think he's refused that. So yeah, a lot to kind of move on from there over the coming weeks. So Ven, a company we covered, it's probably late last year after they raised some money. So there's going to be 20 hours of weekly video game programming for broadcast TV. So they're going to be producing the content that will be sold to different broadcast TV partners to have gaming content. So nice little move from them. Obviously, the gap between the video games world being solely on Twitch or YouTube or live streaming is obviously moving towards broadcast TV as well. Obviously, with COVID lockdowns, we saw a lot of sports broadcasters broadcasting a lot of esports competitions and gaming competitions. So this company Ven is kind of going after that market. Interesting piece here about how Brazil's Loud became the first organization to reach 1 billion views on YouTube. So it's an esports team. It's only founded just over a year ago, so it's absolutely insane what they've managed to do. It's one of the biggest kind of teams in Brazil in terms of a esports organization. So yeah, very, very quick to get 1 billion views. Obviously not as viral as some music videos that kind of reach that figure straight away, but for video games, esports kind of team organization, it's really good kind of growth in 12 months. So good article here as well from Bloomberg about Formula One is banking on young drivers adept at esports and Twitch. So obviously, I think I've made it clear that I think Formula One did kind of the best job during lockdown when there was no sports at all, of having virtual kind of iterations of their kind of primary sport. So obviously there was kind of huge viewing numbers. It kind of waned a bit as news kind of came out that the live action would start again. Obviously the F1 season got underway last week in Austria, another race this week in Austria. But they really put their young stars kind of front and center. Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, like all these kind of next generation F1 drivers. They were kind of put front and center because they were so adept at doing it. It's probably things that they love doing it in their own personal time anyway. So moving on to content. So Colin Kaepernick, Disney announced partnership deal. So it's going to be exclusive docuseries produced by ESPN Films. So I think Colin Kaepernick must be one of the busiest men in sports right now. I think last week it was Netflix doing a deal with him. He's on the board now at Medium, and here's a deal with Disney and ESPN. So I think there's going to be a lot of content, obviously with Black Lives Matters protest kind of so prominent, and Colin Kaepernick kind of started all this movement, 2 or 3 seasons ago by taking the knee. Obviously, he hasn't really been in the sporting world since. But I think there's a lot of interest now, obviously, given the current kind of societal kind of focus on the issue of race. Then moving on, there's HBO are going to have a 2-part Tiger Woods documentary that will air in December. So it's aptly named Tiger. So I think there's a lot of media companies looking to the content kind of plays, that kind of evergreen content of major sports stars, and Tiger Woods pretty much is golf for the last 20 years. So it's kind of only a surprise that it's only a 2-part Tiger Woods documentary, but I guess he's still playing, so there's a lot more to kind of come in that kind of story, I'd imagine. And then the final piece in the content stage, SiriusXM to buy Stitcher podcasting unit from Scripps. So the reported deal is 300 million. So for those of you who don't know Sirius, it's XM radio, kind of premium kind of radio network in the US. They've been pretty active in buying up different kind of assets. So they bought Pandora, for example. So they're really kind of making a play to compete with the likes of Apple and Spotify in terms of audio broadcasting, audio podcast content, and ultimately music as well. So they've looking to spend a lot of money here for Stitcher, and Stitcher is kind of one of those platforms that have made a space for themselves. Obviously, it was kind of dominated by Apple for many years. Obviously, Spotify have recently really come into the space, doing like the Joe Rogan kind of exclusive deal that we talked about. So yeah, Stitcher looks like it's going to SiriusXM radio. Moving on to marketing and social, US government may ban TikTok and other Chinese apps. So India did shut down TikTok in India for security reasons. Obviously, there's been a bit of tension growing there between the two nations in the last month or so. But Mike Pompeo from the US government kind of said that they're looking at it. Obviously, there's kind of security concerns that they have, and obviously TikTok is a Chinese app. They say that any of the Western users' data is stored in the US and Singapore, not in Beijing. But I think obviously the US government is looking at that to see if data could be passed back to the Beijing government. So a lot to play there. Obviously, everyone kind of moved over to TikTok during COVID. So a lot of people have built audiences there, which might get wiped out overnight if the US government decides to act on that potential ban threat. And then interesting piece from Gartner, CMO spend survey shows how digital budgets will increase in 2021. So I might actually open up that piece just to get the actual number. There's a nice little graph here that digital advertising is going to really increase, social marketing, but there is a number here. Very heavy on the numbers, so it's not easy to find that at first glance. But essentially the main point and the main takeaway is that digital budgets will be increasing, which is quite interesting. Obviously, we're very digital focused here, and it's something that I'm kind of personally passionate about as well for my own company. And then Twitter stock rises on potential subscription platform. So Twitter closed up 7.3% on Wednesday after a job listing kind of alerted people to the potential of a subscription service under the code name Griffon. So kind of mentioned about obviously being a subscription service, working closely with the payments team. So obviously the speculation was that it's going to be a subscription service. Not sure if it's going to be in the sports space. Obviously Twitter have been kind of involved in sports for a long time. I think they were the first ones to work with the NFL for their Thursday Night Football that was broadcast on Twitter Live. Obviously, they bought Periscope a number of years ago, so there is something potentially there where they might make use of payments, live streaming to create a subscription service. So not a lot to go on there, and there's probably a lot to play out if they're only looking to hire people for it now. Obviously, they might have internal teams working on it, but yeah, huge jump there. And obviously, if the likes of Twitter could get that monthly revenue that the investment world loves, then it could be a winner for Twitter. And then looking at some deals, some big money in the esports world. Kind of the trend for the last couple of years. But Caffeine raises 113 million Series D funding. So it's kind of a competitor to YouTube gaming, Facebook gaming, Twitch. They raised a lot of money. Fox has been one of the major investors. I think from very early on, I know, if not from the beginning. I haven't seen it doing anything with the previous amount of money raised, and they've raised a lot of money. So it'll be interesting to see what the goal is here with the 113 million. Might look into that a bit more for next week's newsletter, and maybe I might do this video again as well, so I might have a longer piece to share. And then Sony invests 250 million in Fortnite maker Epic Games for a minority stake. So it's an interesting kind of move from Sony. In the article, it kind of mentions that Epic Games will stay cross-platform. I think cross-platforming games should be the future. Whether you're on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation, I think everyone should be able to play against each other. Obviously, Epic or Fortnite is one of those examples of multi-platform, cross-platform games. So yeah, obviously Steam is one of the biggest players in terms of market for video games on PC, but Epic Games is really kind of the challenger there with pretty good kind of marketplace as well for games on PC. So it'd be interesting to see where Sony kind of takes this. Is it just an investment in the Fortnite brand? Obviously they've been doing pretty epic things beyond just the game. It's a game I've never really played, but their Travis Scott kind of partnership a couple of months ago draw huge numbers in terms of a virtual digital concert. So obviously with Sony being in not just video games, but obviously Sony Music as well being a huge part of the Sony business, there might be something there that they're kind of looking at to kind of bring forward. And then partnerships, Pixelot inks deals with FC Barcelona to begin integration of AI automated coaching solution. So Pixelot, I'm not sure if we definitely covered them a few times, but they're kind of AI and computer vision camera systems for the sports world. So they do a lot of kind of production for kind of lower leagues. So have a couple of their cameras around a pitch, and then it kind of produces kind of highlights from that using their sensors and cameras and computer vision to do so. But this deal with Barcelona is going to see cameras at the new camp and at their training ground at the Mestalla, to kind of help their coaches to kind of evaluate player performance, to give more personalized stats for each individual player, and basically help coaches kind of make decisions and see where players are kind of performing using computer vision and AI. And then One Championship taps Microsoft to accelerate digital fan experience. So another big move here from Microsoft. One Championship is kind of one of the biggest players against UFC. Obviously UFC pretty much owns MMA, but One Championship has made some interesting inroads in there. So they're going to be using Microsoft for their fan experience. And then World Table Tennis and IMG agree commercial deal. So it's from 2021. So IMG, they've got big agreements with a lot of the big kind of sporting leagues and federations around the world. Big deals with tennis and golf. The same company owns the UFC as well, so IMG is a huge player there. Obviously table tennis is probably not the biggest sport in the world, kind of gets media attention in and around the Olympics, but obviously there's a huge fan base and player base around the world, so MG going after that. So I'd imagine it's going to be, media coverage, broadcasting rights, stats. So it's obviously it's a wide ranging deal. And then in the e-commerce world, so Real Madrid is teaming up with Legends to sell merchandise and apparel. So the Legends group is kind of part owned by the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Yankees. So now they're adding Real Madrid. So three powerhouses in three different sports to kind of go for a kind of joined a retail and e-commerce strategy. So I think there'll be multiple shops in Madrid, across Real Madrid, Dallas Cowboys, and New York Yankees merch. So obviously we've seen a lot of teams signing up with Fanatics. I think was it last week or the week before, PSG doing their 10-year deal with Fanatics. So this is kind of a challenger looking to do similar things, but obviously with teams directly kind of owning the company that will kind of manage the merchandise and apparel. It's interesting to see that, and again, it's Sportico, definitely one of my new favorites. So looking at racism, obviously we kind of covered Colin Kaepernick earlier getting his new deals with ESPN and Disney, but obviously it's a story that's going to run and run. But obviously we've kind of got a couple of stories here on the Washington Redskins. Big pushes for them to change their name. Obviously it's kind of been going on for a number of years, and I'm really surprised that they haven't changed their name until now. But obviously a lot of their investment sponsors are really looking to kind of get them to move away from that name. So that was hopefully something that's going to happen. It should have happened a long time ago. And then another Sportico article kind of walking through, if the Washington Redskins decided to change their name immediately, what will have to happen. So I think there's a 10 million kind of spent here. So they've kind of broken down, so they're saying that they might lose 3 million in terms of lack of name recognition. Obviously then there'll be the costs of actually coming up with the new name and branding, and obviously they have to change all the signs around the stadium and everything. So it's about a 10 million, but obviously the upside could be far greater if they can kind of turn it into one of the positive stories coming out of all of this. So the NBA union agreed on 29 approved social justice messages for jerseys. So obviously in the Premier League we saw Black Lives Matter appearing at the back of everyone's jersey on return of the Premier League. I think there's still a patch on teams' jerseys, but these are different messages that different players will be able to kind of select to have on their jersey when the NBA returns. And then on a similar vein, is the NFL finally listening? Obviously, there was huge outrage a couple of years ago when Colin Kaepernick started taking a knee during the national anthem at the start of games, and other athletes kind of following in his footsteps doing similar. But now it looks like the NFL is finally listening. I think NFL's deal with Jay-Z's Rock Nation, it was kind of the beginnings of that, to see how social justice and how that could be kind of integrated into the NFL with a bit more of a wider kind of approach to it, rather than just trying to ignore it and hoping it'll go away. So it looks like they're finally going to be starting to listen. So a good news piece there on Bleacher Report. Then looking at AI, so Liverpool explore technology that could let fans in Anfield next season. So kind of mentions here about successful tests at Borussia Dortmund and Hertha Berlin. So it uses computer vision, automated or artificial intelligence to kind of help manage stadiums kind of opening back up. Obviously people will still have to social distance in stadiums, so it's kind of making use of technology to ensure the social distancing can continue. So I'd imagine if Liverpool do it and it's successful, I think everyone in the Premier League will do something similar. So it could be a very good time for this German technology company. And then kind of the best of the rest. Patrick Mahomes tops Mick Trout for the biggest contract in sports. Obviously, he's one of the new players in the NFL who are just kind of absolutely blowing it up. He toppled Brady for the most amount of merch sold last year. So obviously he's kind of the new icon in the world of NFL. So the Kansas City Chiefs obviously doing well to kind of sign him up to a long term deal, and the biggest in sports history. EuroLeague Basketball launches digital transformation fund, so a fund to give to their teams to go through the digital transformation process. So kind of budgets there to help them digitize and earn new revenues moving forward. Good piece here from Sports Illustrated about Spanish League's quest to crack the US market. We've covered it at length here, but their proposed gains in the US, obviously, that's not going ahead anytime soon, even if they were given the go ahead by the Spanish FA. But yeah, it's their big kind of market they want to crack. XIMG duo Nicholas and Chesworth launch rights agency with Hayes. So some interesting news there from former people involved in IMGA's company we just talked about before. So going into the rights agency business. And then finally, e-scooter championship puts racers on 60 miles per hour scooters for your enjoyment. So kind of love this story. Obviously we've seen electric scooters kind of take cities by storm over the last kind of couple of years. They're great fun to use and get around a city, but now there's going to be a sport behind it. I think usually they're kind of limited to maybe 20 miles an hour, and they do feel pretty zippy. So I can only imagine what a 60 mile an hour e-scooter looks and feels like. So I think that should be coming to some cities around the world. So that is it from this kind of wrap up. 36 minutes. I think if you read every story, probably take you longer in fairness. But I was just kind of experimenting to see, what would it look like if there was a video version of this. And then obviously, SportsTechLive was my lockdown project. Essentially, a Reddit style website for sports news, sports tech news, sports business news. So there's a lot of interesting stories there. So kind of pulls in information and stories from different publishers in the sports tech space, sports business space. Some other kind of streaming and kind of lifestyle kind of news as well kind of finds its way in there. So just take an example of this, something that might have gotten in there. So it's talking about Peacock. So the rollout is coming next week, which I kind of forgotten about that was starting now. Obviously not based in the US, so I won't be able to subscribe. Obviously I've been trying to use all the new technology and the new streaming platforms coming out. So 4 free matches on July 15th on Peacock. So perfect timing for them to launch their service with the Premier League season still going. So no deals on Amazon and Roku. So yeah, I've been kind of really interested in this kind of space of how Fire Sticks, Fire boxes, or whatever Amazon products are called, Roku boxes, Android TVs, Apple TVs, Google Chromecasts, how they're the new kind of set-top box. Obviously last week I was kind of talking about things being rebundled as streaming platforms, kind of repackaging and rebuilding cable bundling or Sky digital bundling. But the hardware piece, that's kind of become separated from that. So now the likes of Amazon Roku, Apple with Apple TV, Google with Android TV boxes, and Chromecasts, they've a lot to say as well about allowing them onto those platforms to get the distribution, because obviously a lot of people still love their TVs, not so in love with their cable monthly fees, but obviously they still want to watch sports on TVs. So these kind of hardware platforms that make that happen are super important, and they've got a lot of power. I think Roku is actually slightly bigger than Amazon last time I checked, but Amazon have been really kind of pushing the Amazon Fire Stick. I bought a new one during lockdown, because I had a pretty nice sale. So these are becoming really, really important. So kind of got a bit sidetracked there and looking at SportsTechLive, but it's a great kind of resource. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think it's a good one to kind of check in on a daily basis. Just giving it a quick scroll. Obviously talking here about that's not actually the TikTok banning one. It's a lot of popular apps crashing again due to a Facebook issue, which is interesting. A new 30 for 30, the 1986 Mets. Jimmy Kimmel is going to be a producer. Interesting. Good bit of esports news. David Gowans explains Barclay Ventures esports vision. Interesting to see a big bank like Barclays Ventures looking at the world of esports. So news stories come in pretty much 24/7. So it's a good one, and it kind of gives you the links then to the original news story. Kind of gives you a little short summation, but obviously then you can kind of click into the original publisher to get the full story, which is important. Because that is a pretty serious article on Cam Newton. So that's it for the first and maybe only, possibly not, SportsTechLive, even though it's not live, but I think that will be coming at some stage. But I just wanted to kind of go through this, see if there's something that I can learn, and I think I've learned enough already. It's very easy to start rambling for 40 minutes, but we'll be doing a kind of a series of interviews. So obviously I was at a number of conferences last week. Sports Pro Media had a couple of days, but the main one that I was interested in was the World Football Summit, powered by Ronaldo. That's classic Ronaldo, not Cristiano. So absolutely fascinating week. I think that 3,500 attendees from 120 different countries, 180-ish speakers, 58 sessions. So it was really, really interesting. Just wrapped up a while ago. So it was the final session was Ronaldo interviewing FIFA president Gianni Infantino. So it was very interesting to see. Didn't realize Ronaldo spoke English. Obviously, he's never played in England, so it was great to see him interview someone as prominent as Gianni Infantino. He has a big classic smile on him as well, which is great to see. So really interesting week. So hopefully I'll have a few interviews to kind of share in the coming weeks with that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Have a good sporting weekend.